Well, that wasn't supposed to start again. Welcome back to another episode of Blunt Politics, where we try to break down politics, both foreign and domestic, a little easier, make it a little more palatable for the everyday working man and woman. I'm Boston Brian, streaming to you live from a beautiful, sunny southern Boston, Massachusetts. Today, we got a special episode for you. Today, we're going to be joined by our good friend of the show, good friend of everybody's show, it seems like. War correspondent, independent journalist, just all around great guy, Philip Ittner. I'm going to bring him in just a minute. I see him waiting there. Phil, I see you, buddy. A lot going on this week, as usual, when it pertains to politics. Just pick and choose anything you want to talk about, and there's something there for you. You get the Supreme Court hearing their oral arguments on whether or not a president should be a king or a dictator or a monarch, and just, basically whether or not Joe Biden should have the most powers out of any person, out of any president that's ever held the office in the history of this country. You could talk about Donald Trump and his pecker problems. Spent all week complaining about the temperature inside the courtroom like a little bitch. Also, somehow tried to twist around David Pecker's testimony into something good for him, which only Donald Trump could possibly do. You could talk about Joe Biden finally signing the Ukraine aid bill into policy. So now we can start seeing these weapons, the ammunition, the relief start making its way into Ukraine to help these men and women that are just laying everything on the line to try to save and help their country, and literally try to save and help Europe from what is a tyrannical dictator, what is somebody that has told us blatantly what his purposes are, what his plans are, and it's not going to stop at Ukraine. So let me see if I can bring in Philip here. Let's see if I can do this. A little bit of this. It's going to be wild to me. Hey. Welcome to the show, Philip friggin' Ittner. Let's go.
Okay, great.
I appreciate it.
There we go. Yep, good stuff.
I appreciate it. Sorry about that.
No
and I even got a little something for you here. Philip Ittner, a little name tag and everything. SLAVA Ukraine up in the corner. All right, thank you for joining me. I do apologize about that. Here, we can even give you a little for Philip Ittner. Round of applause. All right. So, Phil, a lot of things going on, obviously. Joe Biden's signing the bill. We're starting to see the wheels in motion. We are seeing and hearing a lot about Russia advancing, so to speak, although the amount of territory that they are taking is not, I wouldn't say anything substantial, especially for the amount of men that they're losing and the time it's taken for them. What I think is going on, and obviously you can correct or confirm this, is I think they're trying to make a big push before the weapons and the ammunition and the aid starts. Correct. Yeah. I think they're trying to push as far as they possibly can while they have time before the tables turn, so to speak, and the Ukrainians have a little bit more to work with. What say you?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, we've anticipated a summer offensive for quite some time, actually. So it may be, however, so I'm trying to balance all this out, right? Because I think that the bill signing and that Johnson putting it to the floor and having it passed took the Kremlin and the Russian armed forces by surprise. I don't think they expected that to happen. I don't think they expected it to happen as quickly and as kind of suddenly as it did. So it might have caught them with their pants down a little bit, and it might have forced them to, move forward their plans for an offensive. Or it could have been planned all along. We don't know. But there has been an expected Russian advance or an offensive push for quite some time. Zelensky has been openly saying it in public. What are they going to get? Well, they are advancing. They're encroaching on towns that outlie a town called Chasiv Yar. I've been in Chasiv Yar. It's the next urban center after Bakhmut. And we remember that salient there, Bakhmut, that was fought over for months and months and months. Mm-hmm. And so now they're advancing. They're trying to take this town called Chasiv Yar. We've heard from Russian sources that Putin would like to see this town, which they seem fixated on this idea that it is strategically important, that it holds tactical and strategic importance. Having been out in the Donbass, there's no one single place that has strategic
Right.
necessity, because the roadways out there are all interchanged. So that's the industrial heartland of Ukraine. Much of it is agrarian, but that is the industrial area. And because it's industrial for many reasons, and because it was Soviet state planning, there's a lot of interconnected roadways out there. So there's no one way to skin a cat. But they seem fixated on this kind of area. First Bakhmut, then Adviivka, now it looks like Chasiv Yar. They want to take it by either May 7th or May 9th. May 7th being when Putin is going to be inaugurated. May 9th is one of the biggest days on the Russian calendar, which is when they celebrate Victory in Europe Day.
Arguably more important than Putin's election day or
it depends on if you believe. Yeah, it depends on whether or not you believe Putin is the savior that Russia needs, which many Russians do. So, but I say they celebrate Victory in Europe Day because there is a fetishization of World War II in Russia. You don't see that here, and ironically, of course, well, or maybe not so ironically, when we think about the fighting in World War II, when it comes between the Germans and the Soviet Union, a big chunk of the blood, in the majority, I would say, was spilt actually here in these Soviet republics of Belarus and of Ukraine.
I feel like the Russia and U.S. are on two opposite ends of the scale on that. I feel like the U.S. doesn't really we should put more stock into, how the men and women of this country risked their lives and sacrificed everything for that time. And I feel like the Russians almost glorify it, over glorify the whole thing.
Like religion. It's almost like a religion for them.
Right.
They've so deified that. And every Russian has a family story about World War II, and not least of which, because of course, obviously, there was a
how many people were involved?
Serious struggle. Yeah, and a lot of people were involved in that fight. But I make the distinction between what the Russians do with it on their parade on Red Square, and they're dressing up in vintage clothing from the period, and this kind of and I've been in Moscow for these events.
Really.
They celebrate it. It is celebrated. It is a joyous occasion, this victory over Nazism, but also our establishment as a great global power. Whereas in Ukraine and in Belarus, and I can't actually speak to having been in Belarus during the Victory Day, but I've been here for a couple of them, and it is much
just so
more
people know,
somber.
this is nobody working, shops are shut down.
It's very somber.
The whole 9 yards, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yes, not exclusively, but generally, yes. And the atmosphere is markedly different here in Ukraine, because this place knows what. I mean, you can say what you want about Ukraine, and of course, obviously, Moscow pushes its narrative about who these people are. But there's one thing that's undeniable, and this ground is soaked in blood. It's absolutely soaked in blood. Its entire history. And it's because everybody has used Ukraine as an imperial pawn to be played in a chessboard game with other imperial powers. And they've always used Ukraine as this battlefield as they've traversed through in their attempt to attack one another.
Right. Its location, its resources make that an easy, an easy thing to do.
It's also a prize in and of itself because of the agrarian, because of the rich soil here, and it being the breadbasket of not only Europe, but, potentially the, huge regions within the world. It's just, there's, not to get off topic, but again, the ground is soaked in blood, but also the ground is very rich. It's called black soil. It's this very carbon rich soil. It is black soil. It is black.
That's why the Rasputitsa is really such a thing. You know what I mean? It's that heavy, here. Sticky.
The Rasputitsa is worse, and it is. Yeah, it's more like glue here, than it is like the mud that you'll find in other areas. So yes, the Rasputitsa here is in many ways even worse. But it's, I mean, the Muscovites love to harsh on the black and red flag that was adopted by the Ukrainian partisan army as it fought both the Nazis and the Soviets. And the symbolism of the flag is the black soil beneath, covered in the red blood of those who suffer in this country, because they have suffered by imperial colonial powers always passing through here with their own interests in mind. And for the first time in a very long time, at least 500 years, the Ukrainians are finally going to have dominion. They're going to have sovereignty. They're going to have self-determination. And the critics who say that Ukraine is just exchanging one colonial master in Moscow for another in DC or Brussels doesn't know Ukraine and doesn't know Ukrainians
or history.
But you see this repeatedly in this war already, is that you see DC, for example, saying, don't hit oil fields, and they go ahead and they hit them. Don't hit the bridge, and they hit the bridge.
Did you notice the change in what they were doing though? So instead of hitting the oil refineries and the facilities that produce it, they were starting to hit the storage tanks themselves, where it's where it's directly about to go into the trucks or into the front lines or whatever, instead of the actual processes that would more affect, I think, the price on the world stage, which is what the United States and the West is worried about. Right, and I think that's horseshit, by the way. I think for us to be worried about the price of oil and gas at a point in our time because of an election is horseshit. Is significant as it may be.
The Ukrainians will say, thank you very much for your suggestion. We're going to pursue the war as we see fit. And I've seen that not only with the oil fields and the oil storage facilities, but I've seen that throughout this war. That they are no longer going to bend the knee or be a colony of anybody. They're going to be a sovereign European state that will be a power broker. They will be in the driver's seat when this war is over, because as we see the advance of the Russians, and the Russians are crowing right now about, and also the pro-Russian Westerners are crowing right now about the advances being made in Donbass. Firstly, they're not going to take a major urban center they're taking these little towns of 30,000 people, 50,000 people. They would have to take Kharkiv and Odessa to really have an impact on the future of Ukraine. They would have to either take Kharkiv or they would have to take Odessa. They don't have the capacity to do either.
My next question was about the defensive lines being built in and around Kharkiv, and the fact that, like you were just saying, the areas and the cities and the villages that the Russians have managed to take so far have not been of the size, scale, and scope of a city like Kharkiv, and it's even just to get in and around the city center itself seems to be almost a physical impossibility if you take a look at some of the defensive lines and the defensive structures and the tank traps and stuff that the Ukrainians have been building for several months now in and around that city, in Chasiv Yar and in other towns and cities like that. But that seems to be the main one. Yeah,
I've seen
the Dragon's Teeth, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it's mostly trench lines, but Dragon's Teeth, tank traps, that's definitely out in Donbass. But as you go into Kharkiv, it's more of a fortress. It's not entrenchment lines. It's
right.
It is clearly meant to stymie armor moving through the city and then attack armor, because look, the city, they're going to evacuate if the city falls under attack, which is possible because it's very close. It's 20 miles, something like that, from the Russian border. They don't have to go through Donbass to get to Kharkiv, and they, at the very least, they could shell the hell out of it. But
that's a mistake that a lot of the armies in World War II made, is to devastate a city and then turn it into a Stalingrad. Gives them more places to hide and creep and snipers.
The city is built for 1.5 million people. That's what it's currently, around 1.5 to 2 million, some estimates, because everything's in flux right now because a lot of people are moving around the country. But even if they evacuate that city, it is still a city built for approximately 1.5 million people, which means it is a massive urban sprawl.
Right.
And they will make I mean,
a lot of doors to kick.
If I had any compassion for Russian soldiers on Ukrainian soil, I would say, woe be it.
Don't do it. Woe
that steps into Kharkiv, because they'll tear them up. It's also Kharkiv. Look, a lot of these cities in Ukraine are some of them are very similar to one another. Some of them have a very distinct identity and atmosphere and all the rest of it. I equate Kharkiv to like a Detroit or a Pittsburgh.
Right.
It's a steel town.
Yep.
It's a steel town, and people who are steelers, people who work in steel and
have this resolve.
They are a particular beast.
Right.
They're a particular type of beast, and they do not bend. It is
like the steel they make.
Like the steel they make, and and it comes from, I am sure, the fact that it's hard work in those foundries. It's working with metal. It's
generations and generations of families doing the same thing.
Generations doing the same thing. I mean, Kharkiv is the train factory. It is, it's. I'm sorry, not the train factory. The tractor factory, which was then turned into a tank factory. I mean, these are tough people, and they will make the Russians pay for everything. So they're not going to take Kharkiv, and they're also equally not going to take Odessa. So even they're taking these little towns out in Donbass, and I agree with you, Brian. I think that as they wait for the ammunition to arrive, they might be doing a strategic withdrawal, knowing that now
the
is
Ukrainians
not the time to fight.
Right.
The Ukrainians. Now is not the time to fight. Let's cede some territory, fall back to defensive lines until the ammunition comes. Look, in 3 weeks' time, this war is going to be different.
And you know what? Their willingness to do that and to not lose needless soldiers in a battle that does not affect the outcome of the war in either way, or a city that does not give Russia any more strategic importance than it had before, in their ability to say, okay, we have this next defensive line set up. Let's go back. Let's And what I've been hearing that they're doing that they haven't done in a long time is doing a rotation of their soldiers. Which at the beginning of the war, I was given high praise to Ukraine for because Russia doesn't do that. Russia does not have any sort of rotation whatsoever for their soldiers. Once you're out there, you're out there. You either die, starve, dehydrate, or all of the above. But Ukraine, as the manpower shortage and as the ammunition shortage got more and more, say dire. Less and less men were being rotated from the front line. So it's good to see that in the last couple weeks now, before the ammunition and the aid arrives, that some of these men and women that were on the front lines get some R&R and get their strength back for when the ammunition does arrive, and then they can make. I don't know. See, another thing is, I don't know. I'm going to ask you, so another one of my questions is, where do you see this war in 6 months? From now, do you see the Ukrainians getting the ammunition and making a push, or do you see them getting the ammunition and just strengthening their defensive lines and strengthening their air defenses and along the front itself?
I think that they will. I think they will strengthen their defense. This is according to what they themselves are saying. They are looking at a defensive line, that they're reinforcing their defensive line and holding it. However, having said that, with the ATACMS, these long-range missiles that can carry a decent payload, we might see them. I think it's a very real possibility that the bridge comes down. I'd
like to see the Taurus. I'd like to see the Taurus enter Ukraine. That would be really, really nice to see.
If the Germans would get their act together, but the Germans have all throughout this war it's like pulling teeth with the Germans when it comes to Ukraine for a variety of reasons, I suspect.
Now, do you think they recognize the danger and they want the weapons for themselves just in case, or do you think they don't seem to recognize the danger and it's just
I think they're afraid of provocation with the Russians, but I also cynically, in my more cynical hours, I think there's a very real possibility that they know that a victorious Ukraine is going to be a huge power broker on the European stage. It's an enormous, by European standards. I mean, this will be the largest country in Europe.
I don't think people know that either. I don't or understand that the size
this is going to be the largest, and it's a juggernaut potentially economically if it can deal with its corruption problems, which are exacerbated in no small part because they've been occupied by Moscow for centuries.
Correct.
And Moscow has always stolen their wealth and infiltrated the place with the corrupting influence of Moscow. So that the corruption issue in Ukraine will not be resolved until they push out Moscow. But it is a top priority here because they do know the potential of this country. They are very forward looking. I had an interview with a Ukrainian history professor once, and he told me that unlike other powers who always, when they fall into trouble, they hearken back to the glory days of their empire. We see this with Trump, make America great again. We see this with Putin. I'm going to restore the glory days of the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire. They look backwards. Ukraine has never had a period of time since the 9th or 10th century when they were one of the fifth largest human population centers on the continent. But since that time, they have always been subjected to other powers controlling their land.
Right.
They have a future. They are looking to a future. It's a very hopeful place. They want to build something here. They want to build a liberal democracy in the Western style, and they can do it. There's not a doubt in my mind, but they got to win this war first.
It's amazing the difference in the mindset.
Repel. It's completely different. It's the. I mean, the first time I ever came to this country, 23 years ago, I was living in Moscow. I'd been living in Moscow for 4 years, and or 3 years, and change. I came down here for the 20th anniversary of Chernobyl, and I came down here for the visit of Pope John Paul II, the first pope to visit Ukraine in history. And I got off the train after living in Moscow for 3.5 years, and they spoke the same language. You could see the Soviet influence, but it was immediately a different atmosphere. It was Europe. It was not Russia. Russia only calls itself European when it benefits them.
You always bring up the double-headed eagle that they use, where one's looking east, one's looking west. So they have one foot in each pool, and they try to pretend on one foot
about it,
and they want to destroy it on the other foot.
Yeah, and right. And
they do. They accept it. They love it on one regard. They want our Western technology. They want our Western, and they
want to be seen as
luxuries.
They want to be on parity. They want the respect of the other European powers. They want to be respected like a France or a Germany or a Britain. They want to be taken seriously. But the problem is, they don't act seriously. They always, when they come onto the global stage, because they don't believe in the rule of law, they think cynically that the rest of the world is only pretending to believe in the rule of law as well. And we unfortunately give them ammunition every time we fall short. Every time we fall short of our ideals,
and they're very good at using that against us.
And they're very good, but they don't care.
Right.
They don't care. It is a tool. It is a cudgel that they use against the West to point out every time that we fall short of our ideals. But the problem is that the alternative they offer is brutal. It is the law of the streets. It is the jungle. It is power for power's sake. Everything power is always binary. Doesn't the Azov Brigade have it? It used to have an SS insignia, the Azov Brigade. But they changed it. The Azov, you got to understand, the Azov Brigade is not the Azov Brigade of 2014. In
Right.
2015, the president
It was
at the time,
disbanded and kind of broken up among the military, correct?
Yes, it was broken up. And what they did was they banned fascist or Soviet
Slogans
iconography,
right.
and or propaganda or whatever. And actually, the fascists within the original, not that. Well, yeah, I mean they're far right.
Listen,
I mean,
every country has them. It's
country has them.
ridiculous.
Every
It's
country has
ridiculous
them.
for anybody in this country to say, or in Russia even, might be even dumber for anybody in Russia to say it, that they have that any other country has some sort of right-wing fascist Nazi problem, when the skinheads in Russia, and when look at some members of the U.S. military, look at the people outside of Disneyland in the United States. I mean, you don't have to look very far to find one in Charlottesville. I mean, you don't have to look far. So I think the way that Ukraine has handled it so far, because it was called out at the beginning of the war, a lot of people hopped on that at the beginning of the war. So the way that they handled that was I think better than most countries would have handled it.
As I say, they had a clean house, a cleaning of the house in 2015, and a lot of the more radical far right elements were expelled. And they all went to kind of Turkey and stewed there for a while. And then when the full-scale invasion happened, some of them, have returned. And that's that's cause for concern, but they don't have any real power.
It's also out of necessity. It's also out of necessity. Ukraine right now cannot be in a position to turn away anybody that wants to fight and help them survive.
But
it's just that's just the facts of the matter. Correct. No,
they are aware of it, and they don't want to change one autocratic system for another.
It doesn't help them in any way on the world stage either. Ukraine knows the more that stuff gets out, the more that becomes a problem, the more trouble they're going to have in getting Western countries to back them up and to.
And they don't want it. They also just at a grassroots level, like I live here. I live amongst the Ukrainians. I can tell you that they would not accept a fascist government. They wouldn't. And right now, I mean, they vote, and they have legitimate elections here, and they have rejected that kind of far right authoritarian. They've rejected authoritarianism of all types. Corruption is still a problem, but authoritarianism, 100% they push against it because they've lived through it and they don't want to return to it. They aspire to be, and this is the thing that kills me, is that they don't just aspire to be a liberal democracy. They don't aspire to be a European style democracy. They want to be American. They want an American type of liberal democracy. They seriously admire our Constitution, our Bill of Rights. These are the kind of things that they look to. They're not even looking towards Europe. They're looking at us, and they want to emulate us, for better or worse. But this is not a Nazi. So, like, just to wrap up with the Azov guys, because I know this is this thing that the Russians love, the Moscovites love to fucking hang on to and grip onto.
And not many of them would fight for a Jewish president.
Give a shit about it. And also, they don't give a shit about it. It's a tool. It's a means to an end. They don't care about. If they cared about fascism, they'd clean their own house first. It's not because of that.
Funny enough, you don't hear the denazify that much. I haven't been hearing that much at all lately.
It has diminished. But the Azov guys, they had the sweep in 15, which was not as easy as it sounds. They had running street battles. That's how contentious this was. But they had a clean sweep, and now Azov is more of a when they say nationalist. Like, I would equate it with more like Irish republicanism than like Nationalist Socialist Party. These are people who believe in
love one's country.
They are openly nationalist. Yes. However, and the Russians know how that sounds to an English-speaking ear, and they will use it. But it's not correct. When they say we are Ukrainian nationalists, they don't mean at the expense of other nations. They mean, I believe that there should be a Ukrainian nation state.
Right. And a lot different than when you hear Marjorie Taylor Greene say she's a Christian nationalist.
That also
a lot different.
Not the same as what the Ukrainians are saying. when she talks about Christian nationalism, she means at the detriment of other religions.
Absolutely.
When Ukrainians say I'm a Ukrainian nationalist, it is because
accepting of other religions.
I have been denied a nation state for centuries, and I believe that there should be a nation called Ukraine, which has been repressed and denied for centuries, and that's what they mean. But unfortunately, the Russians know this, and they know us, and they know how to manipulate us. So they turn nationalism, Ukrainian nationalism, into a synonym of Nazism, and it's nothing could be further from the truth. And then they harbor on like Stepan Bandera, and I am no fan of Bandera, but they don't give a shit about Bandera. If they cared about,
they just
Bandera,
care using the name, right?
It's a tool. It's their boogeyman that they can roll out and go, look, he was a Nazi. He had an SS unit. Look at this photograph of him in an SS uniform. Yeah, Stepan Bandera was a thug. He was and his ideology has widely been rejected. Although there are people who support Bandera as a symbol of nationalism and independence and resistance against Moscow. In many ways, Bandera has like so many figures in world history, he's transcended his actual lifetime works and who he was in reality. And he's become, it's like Che Guevara or Chiang Kai-shek, or, these guys that like they become, they're not, it's not about them, even Hitler to a certain, read Don DeLillo's White Noise, which is a great book about this kind of topic, where it's no longer, I mean, like Hitler is equated with Elvis. It's not about the individual. It's about the imagery and the what that means. It transcends the person itself. And in many ways, that's what's happened with Bandera, unfortunately. But when the Muscovites trot out Bandera, I always say, why don't they ever talk about the Sheptytsky brothers, who lived at the exact same time as Bandera, but are now, one of the Sheptytsky brothers has favored nations status with Israel because he rescued so many of the Ukrainian Jewish population and spirited them out of the country. Why don't the Russians talk about the Sheptitskys? But they will talk about Bandera until your ear falls off. It's not genuine. It's disingenuous. They use it as a tool. This country is not fascist. This country is not Nazi. This country is desperately trying to break away from a fascist state in Russia. Is Sirski?
Yeah, he's saying we are monitoring the increase in the number of regrouping, the number and regrouping of enemy troops in the Kyiv direction. Commander-in-Chief Sirski, the most difficult situation is in the Pokrovsk and Kharkov directions. The enemy deployed up to 4 brigades and is trying to develop an offensive west of Adviivka and Marinka. AFU saving their lines, move to new frontiers west of Berdichev, Semenivka, and Novomikhailivka? Jesus Christ. Heavy fighting continued across the front lines this week. The situation escalated. So I was going to ask you about the attacks in and around Krasnahorivka, Adviivka. I know the Russians, it says they're attempting to outflank the Ukrainian defenses to the north and also break west at the same time. Just curious on your thoughts on that situation.
Well, ultimately, it does look like they're trying to make a push on Kharkiv, but it's a fool's errand. They don't have the capacity. They absolutely do not have the capacity to take an urban center like Kharkiv. It's not good. But it's not dire, and I do not think this will be some sort of major breakthrough or some sort of collapse of Ukrainian forces. It's not going to turn into a rout. That is not going to happen. Especially since they do know that munitions are on their way. So I'm not stressed about this. They will fall back. Russia will look to be gaining ground, but ultimately, this is a good chunk of money, this 61 billion, and not only does it give license, not only does it give a lifeline to Ukrainian forces, but it also gives license for other NATO member states or other states to say, okay, the Americans are still in on this. I feel much more secure in contributing more. I mean, the Danes have only just announced that they're giving every single F-16 that they have. Their entire stockpile of F-16s are going to come here. Not least because they're getting F-35s and they can backfill, but still, it's Russia had hoped that this would be a pretty quick operation. It's not going to be a quick. It is not already. It's not a quick operation, and this will fund the war effort for a good period of time. I mean, who's to say how long? That's Kharkiv, them hitting the television tower, which is sucks. They're going to attack Kharkiv.
Sorry, let me mute it.
Hell out of there's Odessa. Yeah, no, they're as being as aggressive as they possibly can be before the munitions show up. But the munitions will show up. And they will get resupply. And there's as controversial as the latest conscription law that's being passed here in Kyiv, where they're being much more stringent and they're starting to call up men in their 20s. They're changing the age grouping.
Was it to 25? Is it down to 25 now?
20, yeah, it's 25, 27 was the latest bracket that's been opened up, I believe. And this was, people in the West don't quite understand why the Ukrainians haven't done that already. And you have to understand that in the immediate collapse of the Soviet Union in the 90s and the aughts, this place was an absolute shambles, and the birth rate here plummeted as a result of it because it was an uncertain future. So there's the demographics of Ukraine. There's a massive dip in kids, in men in their 20, 25, 27. There're not a lot of them because the birth rate was so bad because things were so dire back in the 90s and the aughts here. So they've been reluctant to call them up because there aren't, in comparison, there aren't a lot. Scroll back up a little bit, Brian. No,
this plane here.
No. Go to the next one. Oh, or that one. That video there.
This is the Bradley crew. Yeah.
Yeah. This is.
I'll let you explain it.
So I've seen a lot of people fixated on this as, look at them look at them retreating and run away from the great fearsome Russian fighting machine. Mm-hmm. I look at this completely different. This is exactly what the Bradley is supposed to do. This is what it is designed to do. Get the hell out of there and get the hell out of there fast. And all the while putting down suppressive fire. That the Bradley,
I don't know if there's what I could show on that. Sorry.
Fantastic piece. Yeah. It gets a little gruesome there. They blurred it, but it's still pretty gruesome. That Bradley is doing exactly what it's supposed to be. Those guys are going to get out of there and they'll live to fight another day. And as I say, in 3 weeks' time, this war is going to be different because in 3 weeks' time, they're going to be flush with munitions. They're going to be able to defend themselves better, and they're going to be able to make.
I'm looking for
because they'll take out the Kerch Bridge.
Victor Orban
Bridge at some point. Orban. They'll take out the Kerch Bridge at some point. Some people are already saying, "Why hasn't it been taken out already?" Trust me, they're biding their time. They'll pick when to take out that bridge at a moment of their choosing. But I also think that what they're going to be able to strike at is that the Russians are trying to build a railway system that goes from Rostov-on-Don in Russia proper, and then it sweeps down, goes into Mariupol, occupied Mariupol, and then heads along the coastline of the Azov Sea to support Crimea. They can not only can they strike and take out the bridge, but they can destroy that railway system. And
can you see those questions on the screen, Phil?
I can see
Just
some.
curious,
How
real quick.
aggressive of
All right,
measures are they
just
using to
curious.
protect the equipment shipments arriving soon? You know, very aggressive. They're, you know, as best as they can be. Will they get hit? Is it possible that some of the weaponry coming in will get hit? Sure, there are spies everywhere. That's a major problem.
Is it safe to say?
But
Is it safe to say that? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Is it safe to say that, like, we don't actually have to wait for the actual, like, for the physical ammunition that is, you know, being sent by the United States? Isn't it safe to say that Ukraine would have had some in reserve? They would have reserves of these that could immediately start being pumped to the front now that they know that it's going to be replenished from the back end?
It also changes what they because you don't want to be in a situation where you're firing your last shell. So, but they have been judicious in what they have used because they didn't know when they were going to get replacements or when they were going to get resupply. Right. Now they know they're going to get resupply, so they don't have to pull their punches. They don't have to literally keep their powder dry because they know that something is coming behind it. So already we're seeing a difference on the battlefield. But again, it's undeniable that Ukraine is ceding territory to Russia right now. I suspect that will change. I suspect that there will be a solidification of the lines, but I also think that they'll strike behind Russia's lines. And I was going to say, is I would have preferred for there to be Ukrainian troops on the shores of the Sea of Azov to bifurcate their ability to resupply Crimea by land, and I still think that's a possibility, but it's not. You know, it's going to be a tough fight. But what they can do with the ATACMS now is to disrupt anything that is coming from Rostov on its way down to Crimea, and this war is about Crimea. This war will be decided. It will be concluded. It will be decided when it comes to Crimea. And I think, and again, this is my assessment and my opinion. It's by no means a guarantee because war is tricky. War is a thing that will change on you in a minute. But I do believe that they can put Crimea on the table. And if the Russians realize that not only is Odessa lost to them forever, which it is, but if Crimea additionally is also put at risk, you have to understand the importance of the Black Sea to Russia's sense of its destiny and where it wants to be in the world. Peter the Great, not to go into a history lesson, but we are living history, and this is the culmination of Russian history. Peter the Great, in the early part of the 18th century, dies saying Russia must be a naval power, great naval power, if it is to compete with other European powers like the Brits or the Dutch in particular, because that's where Peter was. So that's the dream of Peter. Then you have the conquest of Catherine, another 50 years, some odd years, 70 years down the road at the end of the 18th century. You have Catherine come on the stage, and she conquers the territory that allows them a warm water port along the Black Sea. They call this their aspiration to be the third Rome. All of those things die if they lose access to the Black Sea through Crimea through losing Crimea and losing Odessa. No Russian leader survives that. And Putin's got to know it. But if they can put Crimea on the at risk and on the table, Putin will be in a really precarious spot. And we already see fraying, and we have been seeing fraying within Russian society for a long time, whether it's Prigozhin's attempt to drive with the Wagner group to drive on Moscow, which I think is much more complicated than simply that. But regardless, you see Prigozhin. And then this week alone, we also see a deputy of Defense Minister Shoigu, this guy Timur Ivanov, now actually being arrested and being charged with a whole slew of things, including an $11,000 embezzlement scheme,
Did you
which is
see?
bizarre.
Did you
The
see
guy
the two
dealt in
Russians
billions.
arrested in the UK for helping destroy Ukrainian businesses? I think they were arrested for lighting
I
Ukrainian
didn't see the
businesses on
UK.
fire. Yep. So they're
I
talking
saw the
about the
two
Russian,
Ukrainian
literally
tourists.
direct Russian intelligence involvement, not only in the UK, but I mean, as you've said before, the octopus tentacles that they have in the United States government. As you were saying before, I think they might have gotten some bad intel from their government officials that they got going on over here about whether or not the bill was actually going to be signed. Because as you said, it looked like they kind of took him by surprise. Seemed like Putin had to scurry back to Moscow to kind of try to figure out what the hell the next step was going to be after this bill passed. But Tim wants to know what you think about Blinken's visit to China. I know he's made several visits to China in the recent months. So.
The only part about Blinken's visit that I have kind of, because China is not really my bailiwick, but I do know that he came there with a message saying, we know that you're still supporting the Russians, that you're breaking sanctions, and he from
because instead of using their main state-owned banks, they're using these smaller,
that's right.
the smaller ones that they can get
regional
around.
Banks and
right.
Yeah. Stuff that they hope to fly under the radar. And apparently Blinken, came there with a message in hand saying, we know that you're playing both sides and you better stop.
So while I get you for a few more minutes, I just kind of wanted to get your take on this. This is Der Spiegel, obviously the German right-wing fascist organization, and this is the cover. This is Die Landesverräter, which means traitor, and it is a fitting term. But their revelations are even worse. The far-right AfD not only takes money from Russia and China, their manifesto was written in Moscow. 1.5 years ago, the Russian government was developing a strategy paper on how the AfD can get votes in Germany. The core method was to sow division and hate, exactly what the AfD is doing. Top members were caught using the content of this manifest almost word by word. Nothing surprising. The treasonous Quisling character of the AfD is well known. Quisling being Vidkun Quisling, who was the traitor in World War II that worked with the German military. The Nazis. What was the Hitler-Stalin pact back?
You see Norway, I believe.
It was Vidkun Quisling was.
It was a Scandi country,
right?
Positive.
Somebody in the chat will know. I think it was Norway. I don't know why I'm blanking on it right now.
Anyhow.
Anyway, but you can see the Russian flag on it. Yeah. You can see the Chinese pin. You can see the dragon and the money coming out of the pocket. I just kind of wanted to get your take on how it's spreading, basically.
We better wake up. The Russians think that they are at war with the West, and in particular the United States, and they are acting accordingly. They know they can't fight us on the battlefield, so that what they are doing is they are infiltrating our body politic, and they are manipulating our freedom of speech, and they're manipulating our populations. They are sowing conflict, internal conflict, domestic conflict. And they are getting their people who are fellow travelers or who are useful idiots. They're getting them elected. With cause and with good reason. The Brits, we see it in Britain. I was in Britain working for Sky News when Brexit happened. I am convinced, and there still is
22 years old.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
the two men.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, they are attacking us. They are attacking Western institutions, that are democracies. They are trying to divide us, to cause rifts, and they keep saying that they're fighting Nazis in Ukraine. Well, what they're doing in other countries is supporting far right, because they don't care about the far right. They're using it as a tool to destroy us. And so they're supporting Le Pen. They're supporting Orban. They're supporting, the British Nationalist Party in the UK. They're supporting. Look, I mean, the Der Spiegel article there. If you don't think that this is happening in the United States, you're fooling yourself. You're kidding yourself. They are inside our body politic in the United States of America, and they have infiltrated it, and they're turning us against one another. They know the fault lines. So it's, they are using any division that exists internally within the United States. They are using it against us because they know that, I mean, it's Khrushchev back in the 1950s at the UN saying, we will destroy you without firing a shot. We will, we'll turn you against one another. And that's exactly what they're doing. It is, if you see their MO, if you know their MO, you see it so clearly. And
it's amazing. It's amazing to think that a country is acting and just displaying the natural characteristics of being at war with us, as we sit back and kind of feel comfortable enough to not recognize it, not recognize the importance of it, not recognize the urgency of it, and to sit back and kind of dick around for fucking 6 months at a time trying to figure out what we're going to do and if we should or if we shouldn't.
Right.
It's kind of fucking ridiculous to think that a country like Russia, a nuclear power, believes they're at war with the United States and we're fucking dicking around is a problem.
Yeah, well, this is the point, Brian, isn't it? It's nobody likes to be at war. Nobody wants to be at war. But what I have said to Americans who've asked me in the past this question, doesn't matter what we think. It matters what they think. And they think they're at war with us, and they are acting accordingly. For us to stick our head in the sand and pretend because we are so afraid of a war with Russia that we're going to put on blinders and pretend that they are not conducting war against us while we sit there and go, I don't see anything. I refuse to look at this. I refuse to look at this. It doesn't matter what we think. It matters what they think. And they think they're at war with us and they are acting accordingly. We at best change our perspective on what Russia is up to and do it real quick. In fact, it's already in many ways, a lot of damage has already been done, but we can start to rectify it if we recognize that Putin, because he is so butthurt from having lost the Soviet Union, that he is determined to enact revenge on the great evil, democracies of the West, and in particular the Anglo-American alliance. They hate that unity, that transatlantic unity. They want to divide Europe. Yes, absolutely. But that is a far more achievable, in many ways, achievable goal. But the real brass ring, the prize that they really want, is splitting America off from Europe, dividing the transatlantic alliance. And they're doing a pretty damn good job at it. Thankfully, there are lots of warriors, who are, proverbial and real warriors who recognize the threat and they're standing the line. But the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene is literally regurgitating word for word Kremlin talking point. I mean, literally.
But it's uncanny. Usually they try to hide it a little bit better too, because if you're that blatant, it's no help to them either. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to somehow
know anything about Norway, about Hungarian language laws in the Carpathian
and then you got JD Vance trying to give us some fucking World War II history lesson, talking fucking nonsense.
JD Vance, who refused to go at whatever it was, the Valdez Club meeting or Davos, I forget what it was. Vance is in the conference. Zelensky is there as well. He invites all U.S. elected representatives to come and meet with him. Vance says no because I don't think I'll learn anything new. And go fuck yourself. You just didn't want to look in the
It's because he's going to learn everything new. Because he would learn everything new, and he would have a totally different fucking perspective on what he's been spewing bullshit about.
That's right. It would challenge his narrative, and he doesn't want that. Look,
same reason Donald Trump didn't go to Ukraine when Zelensky invited him too.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, look, as we draw to a close, I mean, look, all of these guys who are over there regurgitating word for word, and somebody is feeding it to them. I do not believe for a second that Marjorie Taylor Greene is smart enough to know what is actually happening here. She doesn't, she's gone off about the nightclubs. Well, of course, people here are fucking partying. They're clinging on to any kind of normalcy or escape that they can possibly get.
Famously, Warsaw, London, Berlin, and fucking any other city in a major country in World War II. You could easily go and find, well, not easily, but you could always go. There was always some place open that wasn't being attacked at the moment, that some person had set up a shop with broken windows or whatever, no chairs, and you can still get a drink. You can still have some sort of normalcy. You can still have a night out with your friends and forget about, for a fucking couple hours, the bullshit and the havoc and the chaos that is happening in your country. And like you said,
Marjorie,
the size of Ukraine, the people in the west of it, right?
Somebody's feeding her this shit. And then one last thing about it, and I don't like, I use her as an example about all the others because she's the most egregious about this. But the fact that she then attacks the Kiev is cracking down on religion and it's anti-Christian. She's referring to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which pays its allegiance to Patriarch Kirill in Moscow. It's a fifth column. It's not a church. No other religion is being.
It's like an SS church, basically.
Is curtailed. It's a KGB front. Is what UOC is. That's the only religion or sect or group that has been repressed when it comes to religion. Politics and journalism. There has also been measures that have been taken against it, but likewise, they're also fifth columnists, and there's a lot of infiltration by Russia here. You have to understand that. But going back to the religious issues, the fact that she says that that's happening, not understanding what the UOC actually is, but it is even worse because while she is saying this, she's got to be some variation of Pentecostal. She must be, right? Georgia. She's got to be Baptist or Pentecostal. That is the first thing. When the Russian forces occupy a new town, one of the very first things, first they go for the civil leaders,
first targets.
The mayor, the civil society, the guys who keep the lights on.
Educated people.
Those are target number one, educated people. They go for the kids because they're conducting ethnic cleansing. And then they go for their churches. We have widespread reports about this in a town called Melitopol. We know for a fact there is no church standing except for the Russian Orthodox Church. They have shut every other church down. It is the Russians who are fearful and repressive of, in particular, Protestant evangelicals, admittedly.
And just to piggyback on that, the fact that they were. The fact that it's a known fact that they were taking kids from Ukraine, shipping them back to Russia to try to make them somehow ethnic Russians all of a sudden because they stole them from their parents that were slaughtered in Ukraine. Just a couple. So all right, just a couple things before I let you go. One is in your podcast. If you have any news or any information.
Luke Skywalker telling me to be afraid.
Attention.
To run
Air raid alert. Proceed to the nearest shelter. Don't be careless. Your overconfidence is your weakness.
Mark Hamill did that.
On how many shows, on how many live streams are you going to be able to talk to somebody that is not only in the country that we are discussing, but to prove the point of how dire the situation is, to get an air raid siren as we're on live streaming.
It happens a lot. It happens a lot. And the sad thing is there's still those who will stick their head in the sand and say, oh, there's no real war in Ukraine. I don't see any footage coming out.
Right. Now, do you see
dismissive of what people are living through here? And it's,
all right, so just two things before I let you go. If you have any news, information, any announcements to make on your podcast, feel free. Let people know where they can follow you.
Yeah, it's coming along. The studio is ready. I have an interview scheduled. The first episode of the podcast, I want to be with a particular individual who is involved at a very high level with a topic that I think is really important when we talk about this war. And until I get him to sit down across from me and have an interview, I'm going to hold off on releasing it. But I think I am optimistic that the first episode of the podcast will come out either this coming Friday or the Friday after, depending on how quickly I can get it edited.
And the name, just let everybody know the name of the podcast, everything like that.
Podcast is going to be called On the Edge.
Nice.
And it's basically on the edge between West and East, on the edge between autocracy and democracy, and there are also those who say the etymological meaning of the very country in which I'm located now. Ukraine is actually on the border, so it's disputed, but anyhow.
So just another question: is On the Edge? Is it going to have its own YouTube page, or are you going to kind of post it under your channel?
I'll do both.
Okay.
I'll have a playlist on my channel that'll be exclusive to the podcast, but I've also secured the URL, so we'll put up a website at some point. Perfect. If we get a large enough audience and there's interest, and then I'll have a channel dedicated to just the podcast On the Edge in and of itself.
If there is ever anything that I could possibly do to help you out in any way, shape, or form, whether it's getting the word out here, whether it's whatever it is, you just let me know and I'd be more than happy to do it for you. I appreciate your time. Please stay safe. Please be well. Keep representing the United States over there to the best of your ability, because I know you do. I've watched a lot of your even older YouTube stuff where you're just kind of walking around the markets of Ukraine, tasting different food, living what the life that these people want to live, free of missiles and drones and Putin's bullshit, just everyday life, just normal people.
If I can just conclude one last thing. I mean, that's a very good point and a good way to draw this to a close. These people want this war to end. Oh my God, I want this war to end. Everybody, more than anybody on the planet, these people want this war to end. But they can't bend the knee to Moscow, because in any way, Moscow cannot benefit from this war, or they will come again. They know their enemy, and they know that the Moscovites, if they win this war, they will repress, they will destroy Ukrainian identity. It is an existential fight for them, and they know it. So as much as they want this war to end, so those of you out there who may be hearing like, oh, we're fighting to the last Ukrainian, or Zelensky is being, is forcing the war to continue. No. Ukrainians know what they're fighting for, and they will keep fighting. Our option is either to support them or to watch as a literal, and this is not hyperbole, genocide happens here, because the Russians have openly said that their intent is to destroy the idea of Ukraine, not just the nation, the idea. So they're going to keep fighting. Do we support them or not? That's what we have to decide. And thankfully, we have a president right now who knows what's up. And but if the other guy gets in November, which I don't believe is going to happen, but if he does, Ukraine's screwed. And if Ukraine is screwed, Europe is screwed. And if Europe is screwed, we're screwed. This is a ripple effect, and this is where the future of the world is being determined. As bad as things are in Gaza, world wars don't start from the Holy Land; they start from this neck of the woods. So let's hope that we can be contained, that Ukraine can win this war, and that Russia is pushed back from its imperial folly. Hopefully they'll change.
Wow. Well, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate your time. I know it's late there. It's got to be what, 10 o'clock, a little past 10 o'clock?
Yeah, we're going up on 10. No, a little past 9, but we're heading up there.
Well, I appreciate it. And what is it?
It's all good.
Do побачення? Do побачення, друзі?
Yeah, that'll work.
I'm trying. I meant to say привіт, мій друзі. Як ти when you came in, but I was trying to figure out how to get you on the fucking camera, so I forgot. All right, Phil, enjoy the rest of the night. I do appreciate you. Everybody in the chat, appreciate you. You take it easy. All right, we'll catch you next time.
All right, man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. All right, guys. Philip Ittner, live from Ukraine. Let's go. Let's give him a hand. Thank you very much, Phil. I do appreciate your time.